Hi, I'm Brendan Hills, Director of Communications at Think to Grow Marketing. Today, on behalf of Conica Minolta Canada, I'm sitting down with Donald Rumball, author of the new book, Ambition. Throughout his career, Donald has worn many hats. As an author, he's published more than 5 books, including The Entrepreneurial Edge, which is essentially a literary portrait of Canadian entrepreneurs and their journeys to success. He's also published the definitive biography on late Canadian business magnate Peter Monk, entitled Peter Monk, The Making of a Modern Tycoon. As a journalist, Donald has written for numerous publications, including the Globe and Mail and the Financial Post. And as a researcher, he's contributed to more than 30 research studies on innovation and entrepreneurship for the federal and Ontario governments. Donald, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you.
I have to say my own introduction sounds a lot less impressive after reading through yours. So I think I covered kind of a lot of the broad strokes of your career, but maybe you can just tell me a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, I started out deciding to be an actuary, which is a very mathematical, science-based profession. And I loved the science, but I found it difficult to get on with all the actuaries. So I decided on a switch and I went into writing. First of all as a journalist, and then later writing books and doing research projects. And I must say I love writing, so I guess it was a good decision. Yeah, when I was working for the Financial Post, I started a page on entrepreneurs or small business, and it's the first national magazine for entrepreneurs in Canada. And we did it from scratch. I was told that if you're going to write about small business, you better be a small business. So they gave me no help, and we built up this magazine from scratch. It was not bad, but then we did a total redesign, and it became profitable, and was profitable for a long time. And then I left that because I decided to write a book about entrepreneurs, which is The Entrepreneurial Edge. And so I went all over the country and interviewed over 100 entrepreneurs. And that really hooked me. And from that point on, that was my focus. And not long afterwards, the federal government discovered innovation. And so they decided they would do some research reports and so on. And so I got into doing a lot of research about innovation and entrepreneurship. So I found it to be an absolutely fascinating study. I think entrepreneurs are a special breed of people because they really do have to stretch themselves beyond their limits. And it makes them special people. There are a few bad ones, but mostly they're pretty damn good.
So this book, Ambition, is really about entrepreneurs, but maybe you can tell me a little bit about what the book is about without giving away too much of the plot.
Right. Well, it is a novel, so and it's not based on anybody, but basically it's about 2 entrepreneurs, one of whom is the kind of entrepreneur who sets himself a goal and reaches that goal come hell or high water. Very determined, very persistent, but not hugely innovative, but having set a goal, they just stick to it. For a while in management theory, they used to call that stick-to-itiveness. I think that's gone out of fashion for obvious reasons. And then the other entrepreneur is much more flexible. He has fun. And if something isn't working for him, he drops it right away and moves on to something else. And so these 2 finally get together in a project of huge ambition where they pool their resources and multiply that by 10 by borrowing from banks and venture capitalists and so on, and then go for taking over a very large company, which they succeed in, but it's still a rocky path. But in any event, it's a contrast in 2 entrepreneurs, and there are other people involved. There's a CEO of a large company who does some dirty work, but who, when you discover why, you realize why. And also the wife of the persistent one, who is a remarkable, funny, common sense woman who keeps them all in line.
Yeah. So you spoke a little about the 2 different kind of styles of entrepreneur, and those are represented obviously by Dan and Gene in the book.
Right.
Do you see those two kind of archetypes of entrepreneurs being fairly consistent in your experience? Like most entrepreneurial ventures have those two types of personalities?
Definitely. I mean, those are two very common ones. But
Yeah.
the thing I discovered when I interviewed my 100 entrepreneurs was that the personalities and characters and so on are all over the map. There are a few commonalities, and each one, the successful ones, understand that if they play to their strengths, they will succeed. The ones who don't succeed are the ones who think they're good at something they're not good at, and that causes a lot of problems. So, by and large, the persistent versus flexible is a very common theme, but there are other common themes that run through them.
There's a moment in the book I even remember where I think Dan is debating whether or not he should go into business with Gene.
Yeah.
And Dottie Dan's wife Dottie pushes him to eventually go into business because they're kind of different personalities, that they complement each other's weaknesses or strengths, right?
That's so important
Yeah.
in entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and that's why partnerships are so valuable, because how many people have all the skills necessary to run a business?
Right.
That has a lot of risk involved. So Dan has blind spots because he is so focused and so persistent, whereas Gene has no blind spots, although he might lack some of Dan's persistence. So Dottie understood that with Gene at his side, Dan would be protected, and often those are the best partners. Well, Ambition was about my 45th attempt at a title. It was very hard to find a title, but it hits at the key aspect of an entrepreneur, which is they identify opportunities which are beyond the reach of their resources. In other words, they do not have the resources to achieve those objectives, but they go for it anyway. And that's the ambition. Because once you have somebody who makes that decision to go for an opportunity that is beyond their resources, straight away you have risk. And in dealing with the risk, you have to be competent. That's the core narrative of a successful entrepreneur, the opportunity identification, the risk, and the competence. And part of the competence is innovation, because if you have a big risk, you have to be innovative. And I'd say most of the innovation in entrepreneurs is being between a rock and a hard place. That's where the competence comes in. And but the driver of the whole thing is the ambition, the desire to do something that everybody else says you cannot be done.
Right.
Small business basically identifies opportunities that are within the reach of their resources. In other words, if a small business has X resources, they will not look at opportunities that require more than X resources. So whether it's a small store, or it's a consulting firm, or it's somebody who wants to write even, they will not spend money or bring in resources beyond what they actually control. So that doesn't make them any less of a business person or somebody who knows how to get things done.
Yeah.
But it does mean that they do not go beyond what they know they can fund.
I see. Well, I wanted to read a statistic to you, actually, because according to ISED Canada, Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada, more than 95% of establishments within the print industry are considered small businesses.
Yeah.
And they measure that based on number of employees, and that is less than 100, which seems fairly large to me.
It's medium-sized, actually. But
Medium-sized.
Yeah.
But that same statistic is really also true for all of Canada.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 98% of all establishments in Canada are considered small or medium-sized. So I imagine that many of these establishments are looking to kind of outgrow that moniker of small business, and I wonder at what point they can become an entrepreneur through that desire to grow.
In the print industry, as in many other industries, a lot of the companies are niche firms. In other words, they have a very special niche, and they can absolutely own their clients because they provide superlative service, and they look after their clients, and they can keep them. If you want to grow a little more rapidly, you have to step outside your niche often. And so what that means is you have to find connections to other clients or other industries or other regions geographically, or even other technologies. And to do that, then you really have to step back and give yourself a lot of thought about where you think the opportunities are, because that identification of opportunities is the key if you want to grow fast. And then once you get on a rapid growth path, the key again is finding ways to get other people to do what you want them to do, because you can't do it all yourself. And it's I did a study for the Ontario government on the 6 stages of growth, and it's quite interesting the way at each stage the entrepreneur has to focus on certain key things and then let other people do the rest of it.
I see. Do you have maybe, like, looking at the events that take place in Ambition, are there kind of identifying areas for growth, kind of new opportunities is obviously really important. Are there any other kind of general lessons that can be learned for either those in the print industry or even any industries in general on how to grow from this kind of small business to a larger business? And
yeah, I think there are. One of the really difficult things is to be able to see your path from where you are to where you want to be. You'll find when you get there that your path has been totally different. But when you start, you have to have a path. And if you have that path and you believe in it, and you are able to change it when you see that it's not working, you can get there. But if you just go with the flow and let things happen, you will not grow rapidly, because there are always enough things getting in your way that you won't be able to do it. So it doesn't have to be planning in the sense of, a 500-page booklet that describes every possible contingency, but you do have to have a clear direction and goals, and you have to have an idea about where you're going to get the resources or the markets or the products or whatever you need to grow, and then be extremely alert to when something's not working out, you chuck it out.
Right. So having that kind of adaptability, really adapting on the fly, changing maybe your course almost entirely if a new business opportunity presents itself or something like that.
And that comes up in the book in 2 or 3 instances. And there's also more than one way to skin a cat. And, one of my examples, I had many more originally, but I had to slim the book down, and is that Dan, the one entrepreneur, had figured out that he could launch this new product and it would lose money for a couple of years and so on and so forth. And Gene, the flexible one, said, well, why don't you enter it into a design competition in Europe and then count it as an import with European design?
Right.
And you'll make money right away.
Right.
And that is in fact what happened.
And it works out.
It worked.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a board of directors in a lot of companies, particularly once you get past 50 employees, you pretty much have to have a board of directors. But the board of directors has very specific legal requirements. I mean, they are there to safeguard the organization, if you like. So you have your lawyer, your banker, your accountant, and so on. The informal ones, which you might call an advisory committee or an advisory board, of people who basically can sit down with the entrepreneur and say, "You're an idiot. What are you smoking? I mean, get a life and wake up." And if he looks for that, or she looks for that, men are much more likely to get into that situation than women. But anyway, if they look for that and are open to getting advice and absorb it and alter their course, that can be absolutely key. And in fact, with the Brains Trust, that was in fact, what happened. That it enabled Dan, who was deliberately provocative with them and saying, come on, hit me, that he got enough good advice that he was able to steer clear of the major potholes.
Yeah. And like we were saying earlier, like if Dottie had not kind of come in and slapped him around a bit and kind of set him straight, he may not have made that final decision to really enter into the business.
That's right. Yeah. One of the key ways of growing for a large organization is to do partnerships with much smaller firms that are innovative and nimble, and then in effect incorporate their ideas into the big company's operation. Microsoft does that a lot. BlackBerry made its major leap by buying a small firm in Ottawa, which has become at the very core of their new existence as a software company. And so yes, it does often work. And I think the best companies understand what smaller companies have to offer, which is the nimbleness and the innovation. Whereas the companies that are less open, shall we say, to that kind of attitude would tend to look at small businesses fly by night and not competent because they don't have the institutional structure that a big company has. And in fact, with Philip Warrington, what happened with him was he made a dramatic mistake, which I will withhold for the moment.
Of course, yeah.
And he had to recover from it somehow. And so he sat back and decided what was a short-term and a medium-term solution to that problem, and acted on it with total ruthlessness. Right. Absolutely, because if he didn't, his company would be in terrible trouble. He'd be fired, and the company would lose, millions of dollars of shareholder value. So I think with big business, if there's a threat to the survival or the prosperity of a company, they will often do things quite ruthlessly. And not through malice, just because that's the only way they can do it.
Smart business sense, even if it's ruthless.
And so I think one of the things that happens is, in the end, the two entrepreneurs understand why Warrington did what he did, even if they hate him for it.
Yeah, and I won't give away whether or not Dan does eventually get his revenge in the end. Turning to the actual production of Ambition. This is, I believe, your first foray into writing fiction.
Yes.
So why the change, first of all, and then second of all, what's different about writing for fiction than writing for nonfiction?
Well, that's a big question. I decided to get into fiction because I started writing a book about the way that capitalism has lost its way a little bit. But when you get into that, it's huge. Right. And there are so many aspects, and I thought, well, why would anybody believe me when there are all these other people writing learned treatises on how capitalism's in trouble? And so I decided to try a novel, because in a novel you can tell the truth without worrying about if somebody's going to sue you for libel. Right. And also, doing fiction enables you to get at issues through people and the things they do in a way you just cannot do in nonfiction. Now, having made that decision, my early drafts of the fiction were awful. There was way too much nonfiction in it, so I had to gradually weed all that out until finally I've got something that is more or less a novel.
Yes.
It may be a little heavy on the nonfiction aspects, but it is a novel, and I think that the people, because you get people to read these all the time, the people who read seem to think it's okay, but it is a totally different career. I mean, writing nonfiction and fiction is like going from manufacturing to service industry. It's a completely different approach.
Mm-hmm. So someone reading through Ambition, what are a few things that they might learn? Why should someone go out and buy this book?
Well, the thing that always amazes me is to people who are not in business, they have no idea what it's like. because so few books really get into what it's like. Even books about businesses, it's generally a murder or some horrific fraud or something. It's not really about what it's like to be in business. And we've had books about what it's like to be in the hotel industry, the car industry, the legal profession, all those kinds of things, but never anything about being in business. And so there is that aspect, as you rightly point out. They estimate that about 30% of Canadians are interested in, to a greater or lesser degree, having their own business. The number of entrepreneurs in the country is closer to 10 or 15, depending on the year. But there are a lot of people who are interested. My wife is a nurse. She has got no interest whatsoever, but she liked the characters. And so I think the people who will get the most out of this book are people who are interested enough to actually taste what it's like to be in business. Somebody who's already in business might get a kick out of seeing how the entrepreneurs reacted with each other and with big business. But I think if anybody who has any interest at all in a potential life as an entrepreneur, this would open up some windows, I think. And in fact, the way it's going, more and more people are going to have to be entrepreneurs because employment is getting more and more difficult.
So in the past, the books that you have published have all been through publishers. But this time around, you're self-publishing. What is different about publishing yourself this time around versus through an official publisher?
Yeah, up to about 10 or 15 years ago, most books went through publishers, and publishers really ruled the market. But since the advent of people like Amazon, Chapters Indigo, and so on, which are and Costco, are mass marketers of books, the margins of publishers have been cut and their share of the market has reduced. So as a result, they have fewer resources. So they've just let go a lot of the things they used to do, like publicity, editing the manuscript, designing the production of the book, all those things which they did so well for so long. They just can't afford them anymore. So they've kind of abdicated a little bit. I mean, they're still there and they still do some wonderful books, but they're having to focus much more on books that they are 99% certain will sell a lot of copies. So if you haven't got a book, if you haven't got a name where people know you're going to sell a lot of books, or if you haven't got a book that is an obvious winner and it has to earn its stripes in the marketplace, they tend not to want to do that. So what's happened now is you have to go to an agent to do that filtering for the publishing companies. And the agents are so busy, they're not interested in the book unless they think that it's going to sell 10,000 or more.
Right.
So basically, a lot of people have said, okay, the only way I can go is self-publish, which means at a relatively small cost, you can get your book in Amazon or Barnes and Noble or one of these major wholesalers, and you can see how it goes on the market. And if it goes reasonably well, a publisher will come in and say, okay, we'll pick up your book and we'll publish it under our imprimatur. And so that means that the self-publishing market has exploded, and it's now something like 30 or 40% of all new titles are self-published.
Wow.
And the key with these, of course, is you have to have print on demand, because they can't afford huge inventories of a print run of 5,000 and so on. So companies like Konica Minolta are doing a much bigger business supplying the technology for companies to do this, and it's a completely new way of winnowing out the better books from the not so good books.
I see. So would you say then that self-publishing authors are somewhat entrepreneurs of themselves?
Yeah, somewhere between entrepreneurs and crazy.
Yeah. You're the former, I hope. So, okay, well, maybe you could just tell our viewers when the book will be available and where they can get it.
Well, it's available now. You can get it on Amazon, and I'm hoping that in the next few months it'll be available from other sources too, because Amazon has a limited facility for print on demand, and companies like Konica Minolta can provide the machinery for other companies which exist now to do print on demand. But we'll see what happens. I mean, you take these one step at a time.
So Donald, thanks so much again for sitting down with me today. This was
Thank
great.
you. Yeah.
And now that Ambition is released, what can we expect from you moving forward?
Well, I'm hoping, I intend this to be the first in a trilogy, really, of stories about business. So we've started with entrepreneurs and what it's like to be to shoot for the stars when you don't have a rocket ship. And the next one I'm planning on calling Power, which will be about much larger corporations that are dealing with many countries and tens or hundreds of thousands of employees, and the challenges they face and the traps they fall into, and what it's like to live in that kind of environment. And then the third one, which I'm tentatively calling Greed, will be about the interaction between business and government, the lobbyists, the funding of political campaigns, the pressure, and so on, and how that has become a much bigger part of our world than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
That's fantastic. Well, we look forward to the trilogy then.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you so much for watching. Pick up your copy of Ambition today on Amazon, or if you're in the graphic communications industry, come to Graphics Canada in April 2019 and you can pick up a signed copy of Ambition. Thanks again.